Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. The story of John F. Kennedy as told in Killing Kennedy, The End of Camelot by Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard, is one that blends glamour with tragedy, a narrative woven through the lens of America's most charismatic leader and the forces that ultimately brought his life and presidency to an abrupt, violent end. The book follows Kennedy's life with a dramatic, almost cinematic pacing, drawing readers into the world of the 1960s. A time that was filled with both optimism and anxiety, idealism and danger. Rather than reading like a dry historical recounting, O'Reilly presents the tale with energy and vivid detail, pulling readers into the psychology of the major players while also recreating the atmosphere of the era. What emerges is not only the story of a president's rise and fall but also a study of the culture and politics of a nation caught between post-war innocence and the turbulence of the Cold War. The book opens by setting the stage with Kennedy's unique appeal and the glamorous mystique of the so-called Camelot years. Kennedy's presidency was unlike any before it, in part because of the president's youth, charm, and the way he and Jacqueline Kennedy represented a new generation of leadership. The American people saw in him a figure of vitality, a war hero who had survived incredible odds in the Pacific when his PT boat was rammed and sunk by the Japanese. The story of his courage in swimming to safety and helping his crew survive became a defining part of his character. O'Reilly emphasizes how Kennedy's war heroism provided not only a foundation for his political career but also a symbolic embodiment of strength and resolve, even though Kennedy was privately plagued with serious health problems. He suffered from Addison's disease and chronic back pain so severe that he sometimes could barely walk, yet he projected an image of energy and control. This duality between the public myth and the private reality is a theme that runs throughout the book, shaping the reader's understanding of the man behind the presidency. Kennedy's political rise was fueled by both his own ambition and his family's immense wealth and influence. His father, Joseph Kennedy Sr., was a powerful and often ruthless figure who had long envisioned one of his sons reaching the presidency. After the death of Joe Jr., the eldest son, John became the family's political hope. O'Reilly describes how Joseph Kennedy's money and connections smoothed the way for John's campaigns, helping him secure a seat in Congress and eventually the Senate. Yet Kennedy's political career was not simply purchased, it was also crafted carefully. His eloquence, charm, and ability to inspire captivated audiences. His famous book Profiles in Courage gave him intellectual credibility, though O'Reilly points out that Kennedy relied heavily on speechwriters and researchers, reinforcing the idea that Kennedy's power was as much in presentation as in substance. The Kennedy marriage is another focal point, particularly the complex dynamic between John and Jacqueline. O'Reilly paints Jacqueline as elegant, refined, and dedicated to creating an aura of cultural sophistication around the White House. She brought art, music, and a sense of style that elevated the presidency to a near-royal status in the eyes of the American people. Yet behind the scenes, the marriage was fraught with infidelity. Kennedy's affairs were numerous and often reckless, with O'Reilly highlighting relationships ranging from Hollywood star Marilyn Monroe to young White House staffers. These dalliances were an open secret among Kennedy's inner circle, but the press of the time largely shielded the public from them. O'Reilly uses these stories not only to add color to Kennedy's character but also to illustrate how different the media landscape was in the 1960s compared to today. In a modern era, such indiscretions would dominate headlines, but in Kennedy's time, they were whispers kept out of public view, preserving the myth of Camelot even as the reality was far more complicated. At the heart of the book lies the political turbulence of Kennedy's presidency, particularly the Cold War confrontations that defined his time in office. O'Reilly describes vividly the high-stakes drama of the Bay of Pigs invasion, a disastrous attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. Kennedy approved the plan, which had been devised under the Eisenhower administration, but when it failed spectacularly, he bore the brunt of the humiliation. O'Reilly portrays this moment as a painful lesson for Kennedy, teaching him not to blindly trust military and intelligence leaders. The failure also emboldened Castro and solidified his ties to the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the tensest moments in modern history. The Cuban Missile Crisis received significant attention, as it was arguably Kennedy's defining moment as a leader. O'Reilly reconstructs the tense 13 days in October 1962 when the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war. American reconnaissance discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from U.S. shores. Kennedy faced immense pressure from military leaders to launch airstrikes or even invade, but he opted for a naval blockade or quarantine to prevent further shipments. This move, while risky, gave both sides room to maneuver without triggering immediate war. O'Reilly builds the suspense of these events, showing Kennedy's calm under pressure and his ability to balance firmness with restraint. The eventual Soviet decision to remove the missiles was seen as a triumph for Kennedy, cementing his image as a strong and wise leader who had steered the world away from nuclear catastrophe. Yet, O'Reilly reminds readers that the crisis was not without cost. Secret concessions were made, including the removal of U.S. missiles from Turkey, and the sense of victory masked the ongoing fragility of U.S.-Soviet relations. Another major challenge of Kennedy's presidency was the growing civil rights movement. O'Reilly acknowledges that Kennedy was initially cautious in his support for civil rights, often fearing that taking a strong stance would alienate Southern Democrats whose support he needed. However, as the movement gained momentum, with sit-ins, marches, and the increasing prominence of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Kennedy gradually took bolder positions. His televised address in 1963, calling civil rights a moral issue, marked a turning point. O'Reilly highlights how Kennedy's charisma and ability to inspire were instrumental in framing civil rights as not just a political struggle but a fundamental American ideal. Yet Kennedy did not live to see the passage of the Civil Rights Act, which would be signed into law by his successor, Lyndon Johnson. This detail adds to the sense of unfinished business that permeates the narrative. While Kennedy navigated these monumental challenges, another figure was spiraling toward his own destiny, Lee Harvey Oswald. O'Reilly dedicates substantial portions of the book to Oswald's background, portraying him as a deeply troubled man, disillusioned and angry at the world. Oswald had defected to the Soviet Union at one point, disenchanted with America, only to return dissatisfied with life under communism as well. His marriage to a Russian woman, Marina, was fraught with tension, and his employment history was unstable. O'Reilly paints a picture of a man craving significance, desperate to be noticed, and willing to resort to violence to achieve notoriety. By interweaving Oswald's story with Kennedy's, O'Reilly creates a narrative of two lives on a collision course. One a symbol of American hope and promise, the other a vessel of disillusionment and rage. The final act of the book is devoted to the assassination itself, an event that has been dissected endlessly in American culture but is told here with gripping detail. O'Reilly reconstructs November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas, with almost minute-by-minute precision. He describes Kennedy and Jacqueline riding in the open limousine, the cheers of the crowd, the seemingly ordinary beginning to what would become one of the darkest days in American history. Oswald, stationed in the Texas School Book Depository, awaited his moment. The gunshots that rang out shattered not only Kennedy's life but also the nation's sense of innocence. O'Reilly does not dwell on conspiracy theories but rather focuses on the stark brutality of the act and the chaos that ensued. The image of Jacqueline Kennedy, blood-stained yet composed, standing beside Lyndon Johnson as he took the oath of office on Air Force One, remains one of the most haunting moments in the story. The aftermath of the assassination is portrayed as a time of grief and confusion. Americans mourn not only the loss of their president but also the shattering of the Camelot myth. Kennedy's presidency, though brief, had come to symbolize a new era of possibility, and his death left a void that seemed impossible to fill. O'Reilly reflects on how Kennedy's image was immortalized by his death, cementing his status as a cultural icon. He also acknowledges the controversies and imperfections of Kennedy's life, but the overarching theme is one of tragedy, the sense that a bright light was extinguished too soon, leaving behind questions of what might have been had Kennedy lived. One of the strengths of O'Reilly's narrative style is his ability to make history feel personal and immediate. He uses dramatic tension and vivid description to draw readers into the story, almost as if they are witnessing the events unfold in real time. At the same time, he peppers the narrative with insights into character motivations, offering readers a window into the psychology of figures like Kennedy, Jackie, Oswald, and others. This approach makes the book accessible to readers who may not be deeply versed in history while still offering enough depth to engage those with more knowledge of the subject. The book also invites reflection on broader themes: the fragility of leadership, the power of charisma, the dangers of disillusionment, and the unpredictable ways in which individual lives intersect with history. Kennedy's story is not just about a president but about an era. The optimism of the early 1960s, the cultural shifts, the looming shadow of the Cold War, and the social upheavals that were just beginning to erupt. O'Reilly uses Kennedy's life and death as a lens through which to view these broader dynamics, reminding readers that history is shaped not only by great leaders but also by the troubled individuals who cross their paths. For example, when reflecting on Kennedy's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, one can draw lessons about leadership under pressure, the importance of patience, the value of seeking alternatives to aggression, and the need to balance firmness with diplomacy. Kennedy's choice of a naval blockade rather than immediate military action serves as a case study in crisis management, showing how restraint can sometimes be the boldest move. Similarly, Oswald's story serves as a cautionary tale about alienation and extremism, illustrating how discontent and lack of purpose can fester into dangerous action. In its storytelling, Killing Kennedy also underscores how perception shapes legacy. Kennedy's glamour, his eloquence, and his tragic death combine to create an enduring myth that continues to captivate Americans decades later. The idea of Camelot was actually popularized by Jacqueline Kennedy in the days after the assassination, as she likened her husband's presidency to the legendary court of King Arthur. O'Reilly shows how this carefully crafted narrative has endured, even as historians continue to debate the realities of Kennedy's policies and personal life. The blending of myth and reality becomes part of the Kennedy story itself, raising questions about how history remembers leaders. Ultimately, Killing Kennedy is not only a recounting of a life and a death but also a meditation on the nature of power, fame, and tragedy. Kennedy's presidency was filled with promise, yet cut short before many of his ambitions could be realized. The book leaves readers with a sense of mourning not just for the man but for the possibilities that died with him, the what-ifs of history that will never be answered. O'Reilly's accessible style, rich detail, and dramatic pacing make the story resonate, ensuring that Kennedy's legacy continues to be remembered not only as history but also as a story of human drama. And that's it. Killing Kennedy, The End of Camelot by Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.